Rolling
and
hills on
it's
grass.
rolling hills. Yeah, and
Grass
then
and
on
single
grass
track.
in the rain. Oh, good news. Guess what I got in the mail yesterday?
Some shoes.
Some shoes. I'll have new shoes for the first time in 3 years. Actually, this is the last time I got new Altras. But Peak, which are a trail shoe, and the Paradigm, and I decided to put one of them on a little bit of a rush. Good thing I did, because the ones that came in. But it's the street shoes, the Paradigms, and I'll be on wet grass. So I should have put a rush on the other ones. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, I have new shoes instead
Yeah,
of
we'll make
ones
it.
with holes in
Yeah.
them.
I remember when we went over this race the other day, and there's this beautiful path through trees, and the path is all covered in grass.
Yeah.
And some
So
single track. So again, you're going to have your same kind of situation of you're definitely going to have to be on your game. I mean, you're always on your game, but with the 24-hour cutoff and the conditions. So anything different you're going to look at it like you've kind of learned now that you come back, because you kind of have done a comeback. You were gone for a while, and now
yeah.
you've done Kansas and you've done Tennessee. Is there anything you're changing up in your pacing strategy or stuff like that? I mean, you're pretty good at that
I
anyways, but you
I
always say, I got to make hay while the sun is shining or while it's raining. And have you changed up that or kind of philosophy
yeah.
yours? Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Right. I'm probably going to start out at probably 11-minute miles, maybe dip a little bit under that, 10 and a half, 11. I don't want to go any faster than a 10-minute mile, even though you're right, I could bank some, but then that might come back to haunt me. So I think I'll stick with that. And then eventually, of course, I'm going to start slowing down and hopefully be able to ride 12-minute miles into mile 50 or so, and then it'll slow down to 13s, I'm sure, and then get to 14s. But I'm hoping to bank enough to where I can keep moving and stay out there and take minimal breaks like I did last weekend. I kept the breaks really short. And this one is self-supported. They provide water, but everything else you have to get. So I'm going to stop at a Walmart and pick up some food items and have those ready to go. So I'll know exactly what I have. And when I come in, just grab and go, and just as much as I can, stay out there, keep moving. And the goal is to get at least 100 miles, because in my mind, anything less than 100 miles, I won't call it a waste. But why would I fly all the way out to another state? I'm trying to work on my 100-mile records, and so that's in my mind. It's pretty set to less than 100 is a DNF. Even though it's a 24-hour race, one 2-mile loop, and it's not a DNF, but in my mind, it would be.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I mean, that's, and that's why I was kind of curious, because have you ever, I mean, I've been in a lot of races with you, and you just kind of seem like you just run till you can't run, and then you walk, and then you recover, and then you run. But do you ever adopted like a actually organized, structured rock run pattern? Like myself, I will kind of go in with a more structured, and of course the king of it is Bob Hearn, and he's also the king of even pacing. I don't know if you've watched Bob, but like at the Desert Solstice, he ran almost like the exact same distance in the first 12 and the last 12, but he does like a system where he'll run like 1.5 miles and walk 200 yards, and he'll just do that all day long, all night long. And do you ever do that kind of thing?
I've tried some different things. I'm not as disciplined as Bob, being the rocket scientist that he is.
Yes.
He has everything planned to a T. He has his calories planned to, within 10 calories per hour, which is good for him. It's just we have a different style. So what I'll usually do is find my walk spots. So especially if it's rolling hills, and if we're going in the same direction the whole time, which I actually enjoy when we do that. I don't necessarily, if they switch it up, they switch it up. But I'll find places where I'm going to walk because there's a hill I'm climbing.
Yes.
And that's the way I'll break it up, probably that way. Now, what sometimes does happen, as you mentioned, is somewhere in the middle, I'll get to a point, especially if it's not going to be an issue this time, but to get really hot, I'll sometimes walk for, almost straight through for an hour or two, and kind of get a little bit of recovery. And then when it cools down, I could pick it up. And actually I'm able to many times pick a lot of people off that way, as, I might drop behind a little bit, but then I'll make up for it in the cool of the night and start getting some good miles in. So we'll see. I like what Mike Tyson said about a plan. So everybody has a
Yeah.
plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Yeah.
Coming from Mike Tyson, that makes a lot of sense. And so I'll go in and see what I can do, but I'll pretty much trust my gut and trust my body and go from there.
Oh yeah, and that's what we were talking about that before with like hydration, nutrition, but and there is a addendum in that the times I see Bob doing that, he's been on 400-meter tracks, so there isn't any real issue. It's a consistent surface the whole time. Because I do the same thing. I throw away my run walk plan when I'm on a course where like at Blue. Where you're going all kinds of terrain. There's certain sections on that I can run. So like I'll run through like where all the bunkhouses are because it's fairly nice there. Plus there's people there, and I always kind of like to feed off the energy of other, like just like there's crews sitting there and they're bored. So I kind of like to like run through there to put on a show like, oh my God, he's ran through here. It's 4 a.m. We haven't seen anybody run by in hours. And I'll just do that just to get kind of a jolt, to get a reaction out of people. But then, yeah, any hill, any difficult turn, any sand or stuff, or any place that I might fall down, I'm definitely not running. And that's why I avoid a lot of courses and races. And so that's why that's why I brought it up kind of just, because I think a lot of people, just don't think about these things. And like you were saying, the heat of the day is when you just hunker down. And I often compare it to like a computer, and like when it gets hot, I put myself in sleep mode. Like I basically just slow down, like you said, just keep doing the miles, but do them with as little effort mentally and physically as possible, because why waste all that capital, all that resources you have when it's 3-4 in the afternoon and it's really hot? Save that for when conditions are more ideal. Like, across the years, it gets warm there even during the day, even in January. But at 3 a.m, if you can't keep up speed, you freeze, you become a popsicle. So you need to, I always tell people, save your energy so you can actually generate some heat. And in fact, even when it's kind of warm, you see people, you get that rigor mortis and you're done. So definitely
the other thing about if it does get middle of the day where it's hot, or even I just need to give my body a break, that's a good time to replenish some calories, because if I'm going at a slower pace, then my body actually can digest food. So that's when I'll put some extra food in me, and then I'll basically load up with energy, and I can go all through the night with very few calories, because I put some into my body. And then talking about the walk run, I learned a trick from the first time I met Liz Bauer was in 2012, and she was going for her world record. She was Monica Scholes had the world record for most 100-mile races in a year, 28. So Liz wanted to do in the 30s, and I met her at it's a race in Las Vegas. It's a Labor of Love. Now it's called Running with the Devil, but it used to be in spring, run by George Fourier. And I met her there, and she taught me a trick. And so a run walk, and it's kind of like fartlek running, but with run walk. So she'd say, all right, so I'm gonna up at that tree, I'm gonna take a little walk break. And then when she gets to that tree and starts taking a walk break, instead of going, okay, I'm just gonna walk now, at that point she marks her run point. Okay, so when we get to that rock way up there, I'm gonna start running again.
Yeah.
And running is relative, depending on where your body's at. It might be a 13, 14 minute little slow jog, really. But anyway, and that technique really is helpful. And it gives you something to think about, to focus on, because you get to a point to where if you allow your mind to not have something to focus on, it's going to focus on negative stuff, like where you're hurting and what, so it just gives something. And the trick she also taught me is don't lie to yourself. If you say when you get to that tree, you're going to give yourself a break, then give yourself a break. Go ahead and walk. But then also, if you say you're going to run at the rock, get to the rock, you run. Now, what I'll do with myself sometimes is I'll say, I need to get at least to that tree, or hear my watch beep, because my watch beeps, that way I know I've hit a mile. So I'll take a look and see what my last pace was. So I'll give myself whichever is further, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But I pretty much try to stick with that strategy. And it's also a good way when I've been walking for a long time, because when you've been walking for a long time, it's really difficult to get back into run mode.
Yes.
Your body just goes into this walk mode, which is very efficient. And then you try to run a few steps like, oh, I can't even run. But if you do just a few steps, then walk, and then get to the point, a few more steps of running and then walk, eventually you get to where, all right, now I'm back in to the game. My muscles have loosened up, the run muscles loosened up, and you can start putting some decent running. And then once you get that momentum going, then it's like, and you live for that point in which it's like riding the perfect wave when you start to run and it's feeling good and it's a good pace and you keep going. It's like, okay, I don't need to walk at this point. I can keep running. And then what I've found is at that point, when I catch that wave, I got to ride it for everything it's worth, because what invariably will happen, and I had it happen to me in my race in Tennessee, I feel I could have won. I was gaining on first place guy and made some mistakes and dropped into fourth. I'm still happy for it. I got a 23-hour 100, and it was fourth place overall, third place male. But what I find is once you get into that momentum, I'll put off, if I have to take a bathroom break, I'll put it off as long as I can, because what sometimes happens is take that little break and then you get back and try and get back into it. It's like you just can't get back in that run mode where you have that perfect zone.
Oh yeah. Most definitely. I mean, in fact, when you were talking about that, it's like Jeff Rose, who, we don't hear from anymore, but, was in that epic documentary of the Western States and was winning a lot of races. He wrote a blog one time and talking about, that you got to ride the highs and manage the lows. And a lot of people do it wrong. They push the highs and then they just fall apart in the lows. And so it's kind of like, can you relate it to, like you said, catching a wave? And we are Southern Californians, even though I'm way far away from the ocean. But yeah, you catch that ride and you just need to hang on and just go with it. But don't push it either. You just kind of because if you are surfing, or like I used to body surf and boogie board a lot, there's that perfect pocket. And that's where you need to stay. But if you try and run like 5 seconds faster than you should, you're going to blow up. And you'll see that a lot of times. You'll see people in these loop races, you obviously on a high and a low, and I think sometimes it's a danger of having crew and stuff. It's because then you come by and they break you out of it, because they're like, what do you need? What do you want? Blah, blah, blah. And they just, and they take you out of it, or they take themselves out of it unnecessarily. Like, they're like, well, now's the time I need to do this. Like, no, now's the time to just go and just let it flow. So yeah, I was talking about Liz. She is phenomenal in terms of her tenacity and her toughness. I've spent many hours late at night walking with her or near her, and she just definitely just gets out there and just grinds it. It's kind of interesting talking about learning lessons from people. My first across the years, Vicatina, her name's Vicatina, but she's from Georgia. And she was
Lutz, Lutz. Yeah.
Yeah. She was out there that first year, and just a beautiful runner, just floating around. I watched her, and the lesson I learned, which also, and I'm sure, and when I watch you do it, you're not like that way, but I used to coach the Galloway method, who came up with the run walk for marathons. But you'll see people in races, they run and then they almost come to a complete stop and walk, and they just this herky jerky. And I watched her for days, and she would glide into the walk and glide out of the walk like a swan landing on a lake. And I just watched for day after day. And then on the 4th or 5th night, I was feeling really good, and I just had in my head just her just slide into the run, glide into the run, glide into the walk, and just be super smooth and not waste the effort. And then it must have been maybe the 5th day, she came out of the tent and she was not looking good. And I told her that story, and I said, yeah, I just thought of you the whole night. And she got real emotional. She's like, oh, well, that's so awesome, because she'd had a terrible night. She still probably, I think, got over 400 in those races, but it's definitely a technique to think about, just trying to, even if you aren't graceful, think you're graceful, and just, do that herky jerky. And another thing, talking about how you were saying, run a few steps, and then stop. What I do, because I often coach my athletes to try and get their cadence up, and you should try and run like 180 steps a minute. That's both feet, or 90 on one leg. And so I often tell them, hit your watch and try and do 30 steps. And if you do 30 steps in 20 seconds, that's 90 steps a minute. And so often when I'm trying to run in a race, I will make myself do at least 30 steps running 20 seconds or so. And then of course, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But you kind of, and I can compare kind of like trying to get a really crappy lawnmower to start.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
eventually it does catch, and then you mow your lawn, like you were saying. You don't like, yeah, so definitely. So it sounds
Yeah,
good.
it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
So
going to use that. I'm going to use that, the kind of like a 30 second, 30 steps. You said
yeah,
30 steps or 30
30 steps,
seconds?
30 steps.
Okay, I'm
Because
going to
then
do
you don't
that.
have
30.
to,
If I could do that, it gives me something to focus on other than what my body feels, because the body is
yeah,
saying, just don't run at all. But if
yes,
I commit myself, okay, and I can count, that occupies my mind. And
yeah.
you're right. I think once I counted to 30, it'd be like, all right, I feel pretty good. I'll keep going now.
When you're in run mode, 30 steps should be about 20 seconds, because you're trying to do that
Okay.
90 steps a minute. And so, and the
All
good
right.
thing about counting the steps is it does give you that, but also you don't have to be looking at your watch or anything.
Right.
You just count. Like I always count my right leg, so it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and also I use it as a focusing technique to get myself into run mode. So when I'm counting the steps, I'm like going, okay, how are the arms moving? How are the legs moving? Am I, kind of a systems check of like, okay, and then once you hit 30, if you're like, sometimes you're like, I gotta get to 30, and then as soon as you get to 30, you start walking again, try and glide into the walk,
Mm-hmm.
and then I might walk and like go, okay, over there's some pavement. When I hit that pavement, I'm going to do the 30 steps again. And sometimes I'll
Yeah.
be out there. And sometimes, like you said, it might take you an hour. And especially when you have the old infamous and multi-day races, the tent legs, when you get out of the car or the tent and you feel like warmed over death and you're walking like
Mm.
Frankenstein. So yeah, so
Yeah.
your race is in Kentucky. You're landing in Cincinnati, Ohio, right?
Yes, Sydney, Ohio, and then I'll drive from there. Actually, I was going to get a rental car, and then I looked at, because my flight is